I have a feeling that I've already reviewed this one. Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Now today we have another mid-range SMSL DAC. And when I say mid-range, I think mid-range in my own terms, not in terms of those loaded guys that claim that like mid-range DAC is one costing $2,000 US. No! Everything above $1,000 is high-end. And like $500 is a mid-range, and then we have 100 or 200 that is a budget or entry level. If anybody disagrees with that, I'm sorry, but you're wrong and I'm right. So, as I said, we have a mid-range SMSL SU9N DAC. And if you think like, yeah, but didn't we have SU9? Yes, we did. That one was really popular because it came at $460 and it brought Sabre 9038 Pro chip. And it brought MQA on board. And it really sounded good and punchy and resolving, and it was all kinds of nice. And it really did. But 9N here is basically a cheaper version of that same DAC at $399, well, heck, $400 US. It's even slightly improved, I think, regarding sound fidelity, because I don't have SU9 with me anymore. It was a loaner anyway, but I have a really good memory. Again, if somebody tells you that people don't remember how something sounds, again, I'm right and they're wrong. Okay, to continue about the SU9N, the one thing it omits compared to regular SU9 is MQA support. And because of that, it can be cheaper. Because MQA has a cost for a manufacturer, guys. Then in the end, we pay for that. So we can stream lossy format from services like Tidal, instead of having just regular, uncompressed, full resolution, FLAC or something like that. We stream compressed lossy MQA, so streaming services can save some money on the bandwidth, and MQA holds a patent on that lossy format and we pay for it. So I'm really happy that SMSL actually listened to some customers and they made a version without MQA that's slightly cheaper. That said, I'm not going to talk much about everything going on here, just quick glance over everything. In the back, you have traditional optical coaxial USB input. Also Bluetooth if you want to connect it wirelessly. And for the outputs, we have both single-ended RCA and balanced XLRs. Pretty decent connectivity, I would say. There is no head amp aboard. There wasn't one with the original SU9 either, so this is a DAC. But you can also use it as a preamp because it does have volume control. Basically, that's volume attenuation. It's not as good as a true preamp, but it can help you sometimes for some purposes. I'll quickly turn it on. And also, I wanted to mention that this time around, SMSL redesigned their remote control. And I have to say I quite like it. It doesn't feel as cheap and as plasticky as the older one. And the older one is the same one that you get with SMSL, Topping, LogsG. But this one definitely feels nicer in the hand. It has this sort of matte finish. Buttons are more clicky. It's just pretty decent feel. In terms of functionality, there's nothing wrong with it, you just have to point directly at the unit. You cannot play pool with your walls. Directly at the unit, everything works just fine. That said, if you want to use it as a DAC, only you can engage fixed volume output, and you can see 99 is locked, I cannot change it because I engaged that mode. If you want, you can engage variable output and control the volume. Now, as with every SMSL DAC that was released recently, with this one you can also choose several different digital filters, but also several different tone colors. There is like standard direct one that would be uncolored, but you have rich, 3 of them, like rich 1, 2, 3, then clear 1, 2, 3, warm 1, 2, 3, things like that. Look at that for yourself, try them out. They do add a little bit of processing to the sound, but in some systems that have some sort of problems, those can sometimes be help that you really need. Because let's face it, we can rave about direct modes and pure modes and things like that. But how many of us actually have perfect listening rooms and perfect position of the speakers? If they're close to the wall and you have boomy bass, then you might like this crisp colored sound because it will deplete the bass line and the mid bass. If you, on the other hand, have really small speakers and for some reason sharp sounding system, a little bit too analytical, then warm or rich tone color could be a lifesaver for you. Let's not pretend that everything else in our system is ideal and we just want our DAC to be as transparent as possible. Most of us just want good sound. And if a tone color is needed for us to achieve that, then let it be. Anyways, try that for yourself, see what suits you the most, and use it. And that actually leads me to the sound quality. Now, same as with the original SU9, SU9N sounds punchy and exciting. It sounds dynamic, but tonally, it's not the most truthful DAC that you'll find. And what do I mean by this? Well, first of all, bass line is just a touch emphasized. And that especially goes for this upper mid-bass part, something like that. Because of that, there is slight warmth added to the sound. And this influences not only the bass line, but also the mid-range. For example, vocals, especially deep, chesty vocals, sound a little bit deeper and chestier and fuller than with some completely flat sounding DACs, like for example most toppings are. And in my experience, and also just reading over the web and things like that, I think that most listeners actually prefer this slight warmth that's not overdone and overcooked, but just enough to make everything just slightly more appealing and fuller sounding. But that said, this is not overly warm and just like honey glaze sounding DAC by any means. Mid-range is actually really detailed, fast, resolving, and highest frequencies are well extended. There's enough. Crispiness, edges are clear, transients are fast, and it extends so well that air and atmosphere from the recording is like easily noticeable. So this added warmth and lushness reaches maybe up to the lower mid-range part. After that, it's all like details and crispiness and airiness, and it's a really good, inviting combination. Dynamically speaking, this is a very dynamic sounding DAC. It's lively, it's punchy, it's kicky. Spatially speaking, it's okay. It has decent width, decent depth, nothing to write home about, but nothing to complain about either. And that actually leads me to few comparisons. And the first and most logical comparison is with the original SU9. It's $60 more expensive and comes with the MQA. It also sounds a little bit more rolled off up top. So it doesn't extend as high and it's not offering the same amount of air as SU9N here. I'm not sure, but I do seem to remember that SU9, the original version, was maybe even slightly warmer, just a touch warmer and punchier in the bass line. But that means that SU9N is actually more neutral. I feel that it's more natural sounding. That bass line is slightly more controlled and offers a little bit more texture and quicker bass notes compared to these punchier but more mellow and slightly more bloated bass line on the original SU9. And that's it. Everything else is virtually the same. But that means that this one is $60 cheaper, sounds a little bit better in both extremes, like baseline and highs, just a little bit better. And I see no reason to buy the original SU9 anymore because of that. Just don't tell me MQA. Like, please, don't. And when put against a fierce competitor, Topping D30 Pro, you do notice more differences. SU9N is again more neutral and natural sounding. Its bass is quicker and the mid-range feels slightly fuller and more present, while D30 Pro has more emphasized bass line, but somewhat less controlled, again slightly bloated compared to SU9N. Mid-range on the D30 Pro is kinda laid back, slightly recessed, and slightly drier. That means that every instrument, but especially vocals, will sound fuller and closer, more upfront with 9N here. D30 Pro will throw that a little bit back, like further in the background. It has really decent depth. But on a balance, it does feel like a more colored DAC, with that emphasized bass line and with more laid back mid-range. Other than that, in terms of detail retrieval, they're quite comparable, but spatially, I feel that D30 Pro tends to sound a little bit more narrow, but deeper, whereas 9N sounds kinda upfront but slightly wider. This can all boil down to your own preferences, I suppose, but in my book, I like when things are more neutral and more true to the source, so I would give thumbs up for 9N over the Topping D30 Pro. I still do completely respect personal preferences, and I would completely get if you prefer the D30 Pro. It's not a sin, but I'll just give it to 9N as a slightly better DAC this time. Next, how it compares to something more affordable, like the latest version of Logic D30. Well, they do sound quite similar. Both of these have slightly warmer bass line, but there is a difference in the mid-range. SU9N sounds fuller and slightly richer, whereas D30 tends to thin out faster. After that slightly warmer bass line, mid-range thins out faster, and it does not have exactly the same amount of lushness and punch as SU9 here. The difference is not all that big. If you have a less resolving system, you might think like, what is this guy talking about? They sound the same or almost the same. Well, they do, but this one is still better in some aspects, as mid-range fullness, a little bit more punchiness, and just tonal richness. And if you have a system that's resolving enough, you should notice that. And lastly, is SU9N some sort of giant killer? Will I exchange my Denafrips RS2 for it? Well, no. It's not as dynamic, as open, as spacious sounding, and as natural sounding as RS2. But that's an R2R DAC, and not everybody likes those. Another example would be Earman Tradutto that I'm going to review very soon. And this one costs $750 or $799. It's also a Sabre-based DAC, but it does sound better than SU9 here. It's even livelier, more dynamic, more punchy, but it's not about it. It's just about me giving you a perspective that SU9 here, SU9N actually, is a really, really good offering at $400 US. I feel it justifies its price without any problem, because no cheaper DAC, even the best of them, cannot fully compete with it. It also feels like one of the best DACs at that price point, especially if you like this slightly warmer, fuller sound signature. And to significantly beat it, you definitely have to spend more. So what I feel is that SMSL produced yet another variation of their mid-range affordable DACs, and this one, in my opinion, is even a slightly better offer than the original SU9 was, because it's a bit cheaper, it sounds a bit better, and it only ditched MQA to achieve that. Well, in my book, that's a great compromise. Again, if you are attracted to that sound signature that SMSL created recently, and I think that I can now call it an SMSL house sound signature, because all of their DACs that in the last year or two maybe have this same type of tuning that's not aiming to be this analytical tool, but it actually adds a little bit of warmth and a little bit of lushness to the sound, while also providing you with tools to color that sound a little bit to this side or this side. And I really do think that SMSL is doing good in that regard, and that this is one highly competitive DAC at its price point. And that would be all for today, guys. Now, if you like this video, then show it with that button click, share it with your friends, and even consider becoming a patron. That would really help. See you next time. Bye.